Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some businesses succeed beyond all expectations while others struggle to stay afloat, even when they seem to be doing all the same things? Today we're diving into a fascinating study that looks at microfinance, those small loans for people who usually can't get them from big banks, and suggests a surprising key to success. Think about it. Microfinance institutions, or MFIs as we call them, are supposed to help people start businesses or get ahead. They use tools like group loans where people vouch for each other and promises of more money if they pay back on time. These things make a lot of sense, right? But here is the puzzle this research tackles. Why do some MFIs that use these exact same strategies end up doing incredibly well, while others using the exact same playbook just don't? This paper's big idea is that we've been looking at microfinance all wrong. Instead of just focusing on the contracts and the money stuff, the authors argue that the real magic ingredient, the thing that separates the winners from the others, is how well these institutions build trust. They're not just lending money, they're creating systems that foster trust. This is a key point. Usually people think trust comes naturally from existing friendships or community ties. But this research suggests that MFIs can actually create trust. They can design their operations in a way that makes people feel trust, even if they didn't have strong connections before. It is like they can engineer trust through their very structure. So how do they do this engineering of trust? The researchers break it down into three types. First, there is deliberative trust. This is about being transparent and fair. It's when borrowers understand the rules, know they'll be applied equally to everyone, and can get help if something goes wrong. It's like knowing the game is fair because the rules are clear. Then there is instinctual trust. This one comes from feeling like you belong. It is when the MFI feels familiar. Maybe it is run by people from the community, or it holds meetings that feel like a community gathering. Think of the shared rituals, or the feeling of being part of something bigger. This taps into our brain's natural tendency to trust those who feel like us. And the third type is procedural trust. This is all about routine and predictability. It's when loan payments are always collected on the same day at the same time, and follow-up is always consistent. This steady rhythm makes things feel reliable and easy. It helps people build habits and lowers the stress of managing their finances, making the institution feel dependable. The researchers looked at several big microfinance organizations like Grameen Bank, which is super famous, and others. They found that the ones that lasted and did the best weren't necessarily the ones with the fanciest loan structures, but the ones that were really good at building these three kinds of trust. They made trust a core part of how they operated. This is where the study points out a big problem with how we usually measure success in microfinance. All the standard numbers, like how much money is lent out or how quickly it is paid back, they don't really tell us why things are working or failing. They miss out on these crucial trust-building elements. So, we're not getting the full picture. Let's dig a little deeper into why trust is so important for cooperation, which is what microfinance is all about. Think of it like a game. The researchers use the idea of an assurance game. Unlike a prisoner's dilemma, where it is always better for you to betray the other person, in an assurance game, your best move depends on what you expect the other person to do. If you think they'll cooperate, it is best for you to cooperate too. This is the really interesting part about the assurance game. It has two stable outcomes. You can either end up in a cycle of everyone cooperating and trusting each other, which is great. Or if trust breaks down even a little, you can end up in a cycle of everyone defecting and not cooperating, which is bad for everyone. The job of an MFI, then, is to nudge people towards that good, cooperative outcome. And how do people decide whether to cooperate? We're often observational cooperators. That means we look around at what others are doing. If we see our neighbors paying back their loans and working with the MFI, we're more likely to do the same. It's like a social signal that says, this is a cooperative environment, so you should be cooperative too. This is where the institution's design comes in. It is not just about having good rules, it is about actively creating an environment where cooperation feels like the natural, easy choice. It's about setting up those systems that make people see cooperation all around them and want to be part of it. So going back to those three types of trust: deliberative, instinctual, and procedural. Think of them as the tools the MFI uses to build that cooperative environment. Deliberative trust comes from fairness and clear rules. Instinctual trust comes from feeling connected and part of a group. Procedural trust comes from the reliability and rhythm of the institution's actions. When all these work together, they create a strong foundation of trust. As we mentioned earlier, this is a big limitation. The way we collect data on MFIs now just doesn't measure these important trust-building aspects. This means we're missing out on understanding what truly makes some institutions thrive while others falter. We need better ways to measure how institutions are building trust. The paper also looks at the usual explanations for why microfinance works, like relying on existing social networks, offering financial incentives, or using group lending structures. They say these are part of the story, but they're not the whole story. They don't explain the variation because they don't focus enough on how the institution actively builds trust. This is where their theory really stands out. Traditional views often assume you need pre-existing strong community ties for trust to work. But this research says that MFIs can create trust even in communities where those ties aren't very strong. They can engineer trust from the inside out. Let's look at Grameen Bank, a really successful MFI. The paper describes how Grameen embedded itself in communities. They had staff living in villages, regular meetings that felt like community events, and they even had borrowers own shares in the bank. These weren't just random practices, they were deliberate ways to build trust and make people feel like they were part of something important. On the flip side, they talk about an earlier program at Bank Rakyat Indonesia called BIMAS. This program had a lot of problems with low repayment rates. The reason, they didn't focus on building trust. Loans were given out based on quotas, not on whether people could actually repay, and the whole process felt more like a command than a partnership. This led to a breakdown of trust. But then, BRI changed things with their Kupides program. They focused on local knowledge, built relationships, made loan terms more flexible, and created incentives for staff to focus on portfolio quality. These changes were all about rebuilding trust and accountability, and it led to much better results. They also look at BRAC and ASA, two other successful MFIs in Bangladesh. Even though they had slightly different goals than Grameen, they also focused on building trust through community integration, regular meetings, and staff who were part of the local fabric. This shows that the specific mission isn't as important as the underlying trust-building design. A really stark example they bring up is SKS Microfinance in India. SKS looked very similar to Grameen on the surface. They used group lending, weekly payments, and targeted women. But SKS went through aggressive commercialization, prioritizing rapid growth over building genuine trust. This led to over-indebtedness for borrowers and ultimately the collapse of SKS. It's a powerful reminder that just copying the mechanics isn't enough if the underlying trust isn't there. So what does all this mean for us? For policymakers and those running microfinance institutions, it's a call to shift focus. We need to think about how our organizations are designed to actively build trust, not just assume it will happen on its own. This means paying attention to those deliberative, instinctual, and procedural elements. For researchers, this paper highlights a huge gap in our current data. We need to develop ways to measure trust building within MFIs so we can truly understand what makes them succeed or fail. It is about looking beyond just the numbers and understanding the human element, the psychology of decision making. For all of us, this research gives us a new lens through which to view cooperation, not just in finance, but in many areas of life. It tells us that building trust isn't just a nice to have, it is a fundamental driver of successful collaboration. It's about creating the conditions where people feel secure enough to commit to each other, knowing that their cooperation is likely to be reciprocated. This study is really exciting because it bridges neuroscience, economics, and sociology to give us a more nuanced understanding of how humans make decisions in groups. Especially when there is uncertainty, it shows that by carefully designing institutions, we can actively foster trust and create more stable, cooperative systems. What do you all think? Does this resonate with you? Have you seen examples of this kind of trust building in action, or perhaps its absence? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this explanation helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more deep dives into the fascinating world of science and psychology. Well, see you next time.